Well, hello and welcome again to our daily devotionals at Christ Baptist Church. We're going through the book of Esther, and it's just an exciting time seeing how God is moving to deliver his people. And boy, sure it seems that God moves slow and evil moves quickly, and we'll see that specifically today in what happens in Esther chapter 5. And we've made our way from Esther chapter 1 through 4, and just seeing how God, in a book where God is not even mentioned, but his fingerprints are everywhere in this book. All the way from a queen who stood up to the king and she got fired, and to a very strange selection of a new queen. And Esther was kind of wrapped up in that, and she followed the advice of her surrogate father. Mordecai raised Esther and raised her to be a godly woman, and she came in and showed the king what a real godly woman would be, and he selected her to be queen. And then king's promotion of Haman, the wicked Agagite or Amalekite that was really had a deep-seated hatred for Jews, and he was promoted and put in a position where he now could annihilate all the Jews in one stroke. And after that happened, then Mordecai got together with his cousin Esther and explained that God will deliver his people. God will be faithful. And maybe you were put in royalty for such a time as this. And that really gives us pause to think. Wherever it is you are, whatever your position is, you are put there for a purpose to accomplish God's plan and to glorify him in a way that he will deliver. And you think about it that way, you're special and have a place in God's plan. And that takes us to chapter 5, where we're going to see how it's 5 goes into 6 and 7, so it all flows together into one major action scene. But we're going to just take chapter 5 here and see the danger of when you really pridefully are looking to yourself. This could be a danger of pride, how it just lends toward evil, and it's like a drug. It lures you in, and it makes you completely mad. And we'll see that here in chapter 5 as evil moves very quickly to destroy people, while good seems to be still not even putting its boots on. And with that, I want to show you, before we get to Esther chapter 5, I want to read something in Proverbs where Solomon is talking to his son in Proverbs chapter 4, specifically about listening to his advice and talking about the way, walking in a particular way, walking in a way of righteousness, not wickedness. And he says in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 14, "Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not proceed in the way of evil men. Avoid it. Do not pass by it." You don't even want to be on the path where evil men are and where evil is thought of, and go do that. Turn away from it and pass on. Avoid it, pass by it. Turn away from it, pass on. Why? Verse 16, "For they cannot sleep unless they do evil, and they are robbed of sleep unless they make someone stumble." You're so hooked up in anger, bitterness, hurting somebody else, you can't even go to sleep simply because they're not being hurt by you. They're smiling, they're laughing, they're okay, and you can't sleep at night, no matter how wealthy you are. Doesn't matter. He goes on and he says, "For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. But instead, the path of righteousness," Solomon tells us, "is like the light of dawn, that shines brighter and brighter until the full day." It's just the sun slowly coming out early in the morning, slowly coming out, the darkness, the shadows, the shade going away, and it becomes brighter and brighter and brighter. You see, righteousness, you grow in more righteousness, you grow in seeing God, Because with righteousness, you see God, and you go, as you move toward him, you see him more clearly, more clearly, more clearly, more clearly. If you go in the path of the wicked, you can't even sleep because somebody out there is not experiencing your wickedness. You can't handle it. There's somebody else that you are not hurting. That's the danger of the path of wickedness. That's what Solomon says. That's what wickedness does to you. That's what anger, bitterness, revenge, all those kind of things do to you, and you can't sleep at night at all. That's what he says in verses 16 and 17. Robbed of sleep unless they make somebody stumble. Well, with that in mind, let's take a look here at Esther chapter 5. And as I said, we've summarized the first 4 chapters here. And Esther is concerned because she's been asked to go meet with the king, and if he hasn't given her an appointment, this could be death for her. That's the law. So she knows this is the most solemn occasion. She was concerned about it. Mordecai gave her a picture of a big God that says he's much bigger than the king. You don't want to run away from God when he's going to use you in a mighty way. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And so she understands. She sees a big God, that is her God, and she goes to line up with her big God, and she says, fast for me and pray for 3 days, and if I perish, I perish, because I serve a big God, and that's what matters. So now we come to that time, after the 3rd day. Chapter 5, verse 1. Now it came about on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal robes, stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's rooms, and the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. So she took time to prepare. This is no small matter. Put on her robes, all her decor, to show that she is honoring the king in the best way possible. And I'm going to go make this appointment. And I come and I stand. Well, the king picked Esther because of who she was. And this was all set by God. So when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. And the king extended to Esther the golden scepter which was in his hand. So Esther came near and touched the top of the scepter. So he's having a big meeting, maybe military meetings, because he was always wanting to go after Greece. Or he's having some kind of administrative meeting, he's talking, all of a sudden he catches his eye and he sees the queen standing in all her royal robes, waiting to be seen and acknowledged. He could have said, why are you standing here? You have interrupted this meeting, out and you will die. He could have done that. But he stopped because this is Esther. She's special. And he sees, he says, come, I give you my scepter, come. I want to stop this meeting because Esther's here. So the king said to Esther, what is troubling you, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even to have the kingdom that should be given to you. That's a very common saying to say, you know what? My attention is yours, darling. That's literally what he's saying. I mean, he's not talking about having her manage half the kingdom. He's saying, you've got my undivided attention. Now, Esther's been planning. She's no dummy. She didn't just come in to ask bluntly for the rescue of the Jews. She comes in and says, if it pleases the king, may the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I prepared for him. She's no dummy because she's going to not only bring the king, she's going to bring Haman. Both need to be here for this. And she knows the king likes banquets. He had almost a full year banquet at the very first. He had a 180-day banquet just to show how powerful he was. Then he had a 1 year just to find out how to get a wife. So he liked banquets, he liked that. So he said, you know what, meeting's over, meeting's adjourned. We're going to come to this banquet. Haman, get a horse. And so verse 5, the king said, bring Haman quickly that we may do as Esther desires. So the king and Haman came to the banquet which Esther prepared. So she just wanted 2 men, king and Haman, to be there at this banquet. So they're setting the stage. Verse 6 says they drink their wine at the banquet. So finally the king, after he's had some really nice wine and had some meat and bread, and there he is. So what's your request? What's your petition? For it's going to be granted to you. Absolutely, I'm going to grant it to you. What's your request? Even to half the kingdom should be done. I mean, there's nothing big. This is nice. You really honored me, and even Haman brought him here. He's my number one guy. Sounds to me, Esther, like you're really with this kingdom thing. They have no idea. So Esther, as shrewd as she is, she replies, says, this is not the time exactly. This is too quick. We've got to get this set up just right. I couldn't get the banquet set up fast enough. I could only get a small banquet. I could only get a little buffet. Well, if I found favor on the side of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and do what I request, may the king and Haman come to the banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I'll do what the king says. Tomorrow you'll have your answer, O king, but this is not a good enough affair. I could only get sandwiches. I could only get some salads and sandwiches, and there's not a real proper dessert. We need to actually get and kill the cow and bring him in and barbecue this thing. You put him on the braai and just do a huge setup for you, complete with puddings and everything. That's my banquet tomorrow, but I couldn't get it done today. Today's a buffet for me to ask you, will you come to my banquet tomorrow? Just you and Haman. That's what we want. Again, Esther and her request, it's moving slowly, slowly. Evil's already out there. The declaration to kill the Jews is already posted everywhere. There's confusion all over the place. Slowly, slowly, truth is coming. As the light of the sun is slowly coming out, the warmth is coming out, and we can see more clearly. Righteousness comes more clearly, slowly. Evil's been out there. Verse 9. Then Haman went out that day, glad and pleased of heart. So Haman's happy, man. He's with the king and the queen now. He's in the super inner circle. Gets to have the special banquet. He's all excited, but look what happens in verse 9. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that he did not stand up or tremble before him, Haman was filled with anger against Mordecai. Why is that guy not afraid of me? Why is he not fearful of me? There's that Mordecai again. You know what? I've already decreed that I'm going to kill his people. And I'm not happy because I can look at him and he's not trembling before me. He knows that I'm going to kill all his people and he doesn't tremble. So Haman is shaking now. Look at verse 10. Haman controlled himself, which means his body was out of control. He was shaking. He was already out of control, and he had to really tighten himself up. And so he went to his house and sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh. So he went specifically to his house and his friends, and he called them all to go be with him. I need to be with people. I need to be with people. I need a safe space. I need all that. And then he brings these people, and look what he does, verse 11. Then Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches, the number of his sons, and every instance where the king had magnified him, and how he had promoted him, and above all the kingdom, princes, and servants of the king. So it became a bragging session. He wanted to make himself feel good, all because one guy would not tremble before him. And he knew why he wouldn't, because he's a Jew. And he won't tremble for an Amalekite. Oh, this made him so angry. This infuriated him. The pride that was there saying, no, especially of all people, he must bow. So to make myself feel good, I'm going to tell myself how great I am. And I want you people to tell me how great I am, so I can feel better about myself. And so he's telling about how he's promoted and everything the king did for him. And so he's building himself up. Haman also said, even Esther the queen, let no one but me come. Only the king and I came to the banquet which she prepared. And tomorrow I'm also invited by her with the king. So Haman said, you know what? Even Esther only invited me to go with the king today, and we were at the banquet, and we're going to have the banquet tomorrow, and it's just him and me. Now, Haman had no idea that Esther and Mordecai were cousins. He had no idea. You see, truth moving slowly, slowly. And you know why truth can move slowly? because it already knows the answer long in advance. Just like God put Esther there 5 years before. And he had her be Mordecai's cousin a couple of decades before. Before Haman even started his career. Esther's in place, being with Mordecai, and then being the queen. And now here comes Haman acting with evil intent very quickly, and truth and Esther's proposal is going to come very slowly, but it doesn't matter because she's already connected to Mordecai and a woman of God and a Jew, and Mordecai had no idea. Truth can move slow because it has the truth and will prevail in the end because it has the clear answer. And so the answer is already there, but it's just moving slow before it gets revealed. And basically truth just lets evil get all wound up and tied up to itself before it explodes. And so Haman is saying, even Esther the queen's on my side. She let no one but me come to the king with a banquet. And then verse 13, this is really what applies Solomon's proverb right here. Yet all of this does not satisfy me every time I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. All of this, all what the king's promotions, the money, my children, the prominence, does not satisfy every time I see Mordecai sitting at the gate. Who's in control, Haman or Mordecai? I bet Mordecai slept at night. He's probably not real happy about the Jews, but he slept at night. Haman can't sleep at night because all he can see is Mordecai not bowing. And that rules him. His evil and wickedness rules him. He is robbed of sleep until he can do somebody harm. All of this does not satisfy me. So he goes to bed unsatisfied, which would say he's not getting much sleep. So his wife, verse 14, Zeresh, and all his friends said to him, well, then have a gallows 50 cubits high made, and in the morning have the king ask Mordecai hanged on it. Then go joyfully with the king to the banquet. The advice pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. So it's a place where you're probably going to stick your opponent with a big spike or a spear and hang him up there and just let him hang there for everybody to see. Humiliation, pain, death. You know, his wife kind of, get the idea of verse 14. His wife and his friends are saying, Haman, we're kind of tired of talking about you want to talk about yourself all the time. Just do this. Be the man, get some gallows, and kill him and be done with it. Be done with it. And so they're saying, we're tired of you on this path of wickedness. You can't sleep. I don't know why. All because one guy won't bow. Well, the tension is building now because Haman just been given a great idea by his wife. Kill Mordecai in the morning. By the way, Mordecai, the guy who saved the king's life. Again, you see truth? Truth and God's plan, God's sovereign plan, God's providence, putting all the pieces in place. He had Esther, who is related to Mordecai, growing up in the Persian kingdom. He has Esther because of a firing of the queen. She gets roped into the selection process, and because of her godly character, and she was born beautiful, she's selected to be queen. She has 5 years of being queen, knowing the royalty, figures it all out. The king really loves her and is infatuated with her, even to the point where he'll interrupt his meetings to let her come in. God's got that all set up. And now he says, let evil run its course. And wicked Haman finds out Mordecai's a Jew, so now he just extends himself. So I want to kill not just Mordecai, but all the Jews and all Israel. I'm going to be really famous on this one. So he extends and says, I want my wickedness to go all the way to the ends of the earth. And let him run with all the rope he can. God's plan, he's got it set up. And he says, let's build a gallows. Great. The gallows the gallows that Haman builds, he has no idea what they're going to be used for, but he's building a gallows for Mordecai. So now, if we were watching this in a movie, we saw the scene, we'd say, man, this is really going bad for Israel. It's going bad for Mordecai and Esther. Oh my, I mean, Haman's now, he's going to kill Mordecai in the morning. But again, truth. What was set up? Not just Esther being his cousin, not just Esther being queen, but Mordecai being someone who saved the king's life. And it's recorded. That's also truth. And that's also there. And that was also done in the past. So while evil runs very quickly right now, truth is slow to get its boots on, walking through slowly. But you know what? The answer, the truth, the providence, the situation has all been put in place already. Truth doesn't have to chase wickedness down because the truth is there. And when it gets revealed, as John 1 says, when the light came, it exposed the darkness, and the darkness could not overcome it. Darkness can never overcome light. Light always overcomes darkness. In battle, in war, that's why they never want anybody to smoke cigarettes at war, especially at night. Why? Because if you could be a couple of kilometers away and you can see somebody smoking a cigarette if they're hidden in the bushes or on the beach or somewhere like that. You can see it because the light prevails over the darkness. You see, so truth will prevail. God's truth prevails. Providence prevails. What does wickedness do? It gets you all tied up and you can't even sleep at night unless you're doing somebody harm and you need to move fast. So you can inflict as much harm as possible. This was Haman, trapped in his own pride, needing to feed his ego because he chose the path of sinners, of wickedness, and it consumed him. To where he thinks he's got something going now, he's got some gallows for Mordecai. We're going to see how that all plays out now with truth as we get to chapter 6 tomorrow. So lesson here today, don't walk the path of wickedness because it will consume you to where you won't be able to sleep at night. He was rich, he'd been promoted, he had prominence, and he said, yet none of these things satisfy me as long as I see Mordecai not bowing in the gates. That meant Mordecai is actually controlling Haman just by being who he is. That's the danger of wickedness. You're not in control of anything anymore. So we'll see you tomorrow, or the next day we have the devotions in Esther chapter 6.